Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here, and today I'm going to be doing the second part of a two-part series covering the Dallas Mavericks. In the first video, I talked a bit about how the Mavericks pulled off their run to the 2011 championship. I mainly talked about the playoffs and just that little box of time. A little bit about the regular season, but mainly about the playoff runs and how they got past their opponents in the playoffs and just how they accomplished it as far as gameplay. But in this video, I'm going to be talking a bit more about things such as like how did they get the right players in place, like how did the front office acquire them, and a lot about why they didn't repeat their success and what led to the team basically being broken up, and why they really only had one really good season like this, and in the seasons surrounding it they really fell short of having any significant playoff success. Okay, so getting into it, I'm going to start where I think that this story would kind of begin, which is the 2008 to 2009 season. Now, the reason I'm starting here is because this is really, I think, where the start of this core sort of happens with this Mavericks team that went on to do well or to win this championship. I'd say this is where like the main core of the team originally formed, because now this is the first year that they had Jason Kidd for the full year, and then again they had Dirk starting at power forward, obviously. At small forward they had Josh Howard. At center they had an aging Eric Dampier, and then at shooting guard they had this guy named Antoine Wright, who they got sort of as a throw-in in the Jason Kidd deal, but they didn't want to start the Jet, Jason Terry, because they wanted him to be a six-man and come in and help the bench execute offense. So they had him starting because they figured with Terry and with Jason Kidd and Josh Howard and Dirk, there was enough offense in the starting lineup that they didn't need Jason Terry in there as well. So in this season, the Mavs were 50-32. They finished 6th in the Western Conference, and they lost in the first round to the Nuggets. Really just because the Nuggets were a more talented team. Or actually they lost in the second round to the Nuggets. And really I can't blame them for losing. The Nuggets were honestly just a more talented team than them. At this point they had a stacked team with Billups, Melo, Nene, Kenyon Martin, J.R. Smith. Really just that whole starting lineup was really good, and there were just a bit more holes in the Mavs. Like Eric Dampier at your starting center was a really weak starter. Antoine Wright was a really weak starter. And so really the team only had basically about Dirk, Josh Howard, and Jason Terry as guys that could just go and get buckets. Jason Kidd was really more of a distributor at this point. Jerry Stackhouse was old and injured really for a lot of the season. And they really didn't have much of a bench presence. They had like a pretty young J.J. Barea at this point, but he couldn't really be relied upon that much. They had an old Devin George who was injured. So really off the bench, they had basically nothing, honestly. They had, like you'd say their sixth man was probably J.J. Barea, and he wasn't really a guy that could go out and get you more, than like 10 points a game. Obviously, Jason Terry was their bench presence, but like with starting a guy like Antoine Wright, that really balances it out, because when Antoine Wright is averaging 7 points a game and Jet's averaging 16, like it's like Wright's lack of performance along with Terry's performance kind of balance each other out as far as the point of bringing Terry off the bench. And then Eric Dampier in the starting lineup really hampered them as well. Moving on to the next season, 2009 and 2010, we saw an improvement from the Mavericks. Instead of 50-32, they finished 55-27. This season, they had again a bit of an improved roster. Actually, they made some trades mid-season. They acquired Caron Butler, Brendan Haywood, and Deshaun Stevenson from the Washington Wizards in exchange for basically Josh Howard and Drew Gooden and James Singleton. And Drew Gooden and Singleton weren't really doing all that much for the team. Josh Howard was. He was basically like their third option on offense behind Dirk and Jason Terry. But when they brought in Caron Butler, he filled in for his absence, Josh Howard's absence on offense, and did really well. And so the lineup was looking more like Jason Kidd at starting point guard, Oh, another underrated move that I should mention is that they signed Shawn Marion, who you'd say was probably out of his prime at this point, but was still a good player, good solid starter. They signed him, and that was a really good move for them. So at this point, they had, after the trade, they had Jason Kidd at point guard, they had Caron Butler at shooting guard, they had Shawn Marion at small forward, Dirk at power forward, and then Brendan Haywood at center, which is a pretty decent starting lineup. And then off the bench, they had Jason Terry, who was averaging 17 points a game, which is very helpful off the bench, obviously. They had J.J. Barea still coming off the bench, averaging 8 points a game. And those were their two main guys off the bench. Besides that, they didn't really have that much. Eric Dampier was still coming off the bench for them after Brendan Haywood supplanted him as a starter, but he really wasn't playing all that much either. So, but still, I think you can see that that's a little bit of a better core. Having Shawn Marion in there plugged a hole where kind of like Antoine Wright would have been in the starting lineup, so that's definitely an upgrade. And then I'd say Brendan Haywood was a younger, more athletic upgrade over Eric Dampier at center spot. He could jump higher, he could finish better, he could rebound better. So I like Brendan Haywood over Eric Dampier, definitely. I like Caron Butler over Josh Howard, and I like Shawn Marion over Antoine Wright. So I'd say all of those were improvements on the team. And actually, an underrated acquisition at this point was Deshaun Stevenson. They didn't really play him that much, and he hadn't really proven himself that much at this point, but he was a good player. He just didn't have a chance to show it yet. And so in the playoffs, they were the 2 seed, I believe. Actually, yes, they were the 2 seed. And they actually got totally upset by the Spurs, who, I don't want to say they were their kryptonite, but they just kind of had a good counter for everything that the Mavs were. They neutralized Dirk with Tim Duncan. They neutralized Jason Terry with Ginobili. And then I think the big difference was that they had Tony Parker in his prime. And although the Mavs had a few guys like Butler and Jason Kidd and Shawn Marion, I think it paid dividends to the Spurs to have Tony Parker like in his prime, a guy that could just be relied upon in the playoffs, because all the Mavs still did well, just a few of their shooting splits went down because the Spurs played great defense and the Mavs were playing like average defense at this point. So the Spurs really, I don't know how to put it nicely, but they shut down Jason Terry. He struggled being a shorter shooting guard. Jason Kidd and Shawn Marion shrunk a little bit. Jason Kidd only shot 30% from the field. Jason Terry only 37%. Marion only 40% from the field. Caron Butler only 43%. J.J. Barea 40%. So a lot of their guys shot a lot worse than they did in the regular season, and they just kind of choked. And this was a big theme for the Mavs. They choked in the 06 finals when they were up 2-0. They choked in 07. They lost to an 8 seed in the playoffs. 08. Let's see here. What did they do in 08? I know that they didn't get all that far. I think maybe first or second round. It looks like they lost in the first round to the Hornets, which obviously that they're probably equally talented, if not more talented than the Hornets at that point. 2009, 8-9, they got to the second round, which is decent, and the Nuggets just had more talent. But again, the Mavs were sort of just a stepping stone or a little bit of a disappointment. 2009-10, they get upset, and again, they just don't have it in them. So kind of a team that was always getting stepped on, and always people were kind of just waiting for them to fall on their face and fail. Well, coming to the 2010-11 season, they brought back the core that they had. They were able to integrate their guys better because Butler and Stevenson and Brendan Haywood all got a full off season with the team to integrate themselves better. And the big thing that is underrated about this off season is the bringing in of Tyson Chandler. Tyson Chandler had an okay career at this point. He had played for the Hornets and he had played for the Bobcats, and he had a down year in Charlotte after having been traded there. He only averaged 6.5 points and 6 rebounds a game in 23 minutes a game. He came off the bench a lot. People sort of thought he was washed up, maybe coming off of, let's see here, was he coming off of an injury? I don't remember exactly. Yeah, he did only play in 50 games, so I think, yeah, he had a stress fracture in his left foot, so he did miss a significant amount of time with that. People thought maybe he had lost his athleticism and his bounce a bit, so he went to Dallas on a cheaper contract. I think maybe what you would expect, like how Isaiah Thomas just signed a pretty cheap deal with the Nuggets. Now, maybe it wasn't that cheap, but it was definitely a big discount to get Tyson Chandler. And honestly, he put up one of his best seasons, and he paid dividends because he was a huge defensive presence, and he stifled what a lot of the teams in the playoffs were trying to do against them, which was beat them down in the paint, because they had traditionally been a more soft team in the paint. But with him in there being a rim protector, that totally changed the dynamic of their defense. And as a guy that you could alley-oop it to, it was a new option on offense as well. Along with this, they acquired a lot of veterans for minimal amounts of money. They got Peja Stojakovic, who was a good player in his prime. They signed him more towards the end of the season, just to have another guy coming off the bench who could be like a good role player. He played about 20 minutes a game. They had Corey Brewer, who they had signed, who had been kind of floating around on a few different teams, but he was a good presence off the bench, just if you need a really athletic guy to come in and give you like 5 to 10 minutes of a lot of high energy offense and transition, or defense and transition offense. They just had a lot of guys who really could play a niche role really well. Jason Terry, great scorer off the bench. Dirk, great all-around player, obviously. Chandler, great rim protector, grabber of alley-oops, defender. Caron Butler, good offense. Sean Marion, good transition offense, good defense. And then you had guys like Corey Brewer, J.J. Barea, Rodrigo Bobois, good guys who just come in and be a quick spark off the bench. And Peja Stojakovic, guy can come on off the bench, give you a few three-point shots, shoots it at 40%, and can be a good component to your team. So a lot of guys just really buying into their roles on the team and being good role players. Now, if we go ahead after the championship year to 2011 to 12, they definitely took a step back in that they only won 36 games this season, which is, it was in the 66-game season, so that's obviously worse. But let's see here. If you divide in and equate it to the normal amount of games that they had, it's like a 45-win season. So they followed up their 57-win season with a 45-win season. You look at the main difference on the team. They lost Tyson Chandler because he cashed in on having a really good season and finals, and he got a really big contract from the Knicks, so they lost their rim protector. Other problems that they had were that they lost a lot of their guys, like Deshaun Stevenson left, and they didn't have Peja Stojakovic anymore because he was just on a contract for the playoffs, basically. And just guys like that. Like those three were big differences on the team. Their main guys then on the team became Dirk at starting power forward, starting center Brendan Haywood, starting point guard Jason Kidd, shooting guard starting was most of the time. Let's see here. It was a mix of Vince Carter and Delonte West, and then coming off the bench you had Jason Terry still. Oh, starting small forward, Sean Marion. So the big differences were no more Tyson Chandler, I should say, and Stojakovic was gone, and Stevenson was gone. Now those three, like you can probably see that was a big deal that they lost Chandler, but Stevenson was providing great wing defense against Kobe and against Dwayne Wade and LeBron, and against some of the rotation guys for the Blazers in the first round, and against the guys for the Thunder in the conference finals. And Stojakovic was providing some great floor spacing in the playoffs. So it was a big difference not having those three guys on the team. Vince Carter played all right, didn't play great, shot 41% from the field. Really a shell of himself, but kind of trying to maintain like he was still who he thought he was. Injuries were a big problem on this team. Regular season, Dirk missed 20 games, Sean Marion missed 20 games, Jason Kidd missed half the season, Vince Carter missed 20 games. all these guys that were expected to be a big help on the team were missing a lot of games. J.J. Barea was injured for the whole, or actually no, J.J. Barea was gone. He left in free agency for the Timberwolves. Rodrigo Bobois, okay, shot 42% from the field, 9 points a game. Did his best J.J. Barea impersonation, I think you'd say. And then a lot of the guys they brought in to kind of replace some of these wily veterans, like Vince Carter was fine when they brought him in. But like they brought in Delonte West, he didn't really work out. He averaged less than 10 points a game, shot it decent from the field, but they just thought he would be better. Lamar Odom was terrible playing for them. He shot 35% from the field, 25% from 3, under 7 points per game, under 4 assists a game, 2 rebounds a game. So he was expected to be like still at 6th man of the year caliber, and he just fell off a cliff. But you know, maybe if he would have played well, it would have been a different story. Going into the playoffs this year, they lost in the first round real quick to the Thunder in a sweep. They're the key cogs to their team in the playoffs. They had a starting lineup of, again, Kidd, Delonte West, Marion, Dirk, and Brendan Haywood, but no one really played good at all in the playoffs besides Dirk, who also didn't even shoot that well, but just had good numbers off the at surface level. But he only shot 44% from the field and 16% from 3, which is terrible. Jason Terry kind of underperformed, less than 14 points per game. And then no one else really showed up. Like Vince Carter shot 29% from the field in the playoffs, only 8 points a game. So really just a lot of the vets that they thought would be really good on the team didn't repeat their production, or the guys that they got rid of who they thought they could replicate, like replacing Stojakovic with Vince Carter. Vince Carter honestly gave them less than Stojakovic did. Replacing Tyson Chandler with Lamar Odom, that did not work whatsoever because they cut Lamar Odom halfway through the year. And then just guys like Jason Terry not performing as well as they did previously. 2012 to 13 going forward, this is when the team really started to kind of blow up, I'd say. There was no more Jason Kidd and no more Jason Terry at this point, and they didn't make the playoffs, but they did finish with a winning record. Or no, they're 500, 41-41. The core of this team was like Dirk, who had really taken a step back, and Vince Carter and Darren Collison. And besides that, they also had Sean Marion still and O.J. Mayo. Those were like the guys, like Marion, Mayo, Dirk, and Carter and Collison. And none of them really played all that great. Dirk really he went from definitively being in his prime to definitively declining at this point. And so again, at this point they were still doing this thing where they just signed vets to really short contracts for a really low amount of money in hopes that they could just squeeze out the most potential out of them. But it still wasn't working. Like signing a guy like Chris Kaman really didn't work. Signing Eddie Curry didn't work. Elton Brand they signed as an older vet. He didn't work out for them. Dante Jones didn't work out signing him. Troy Murphy didn't work out signing him. So basically the vets in 2011 to 12 got older, and then the new guys they brought in didn't really work out. And then they tried the same experiment in this next season, 2012 to 13, where they brought in new vets that were older, trying to squeeze out the best out of them. And again, it didn't really work out. So, and the reason that they were doing this, where they didn't just sign one high contract player, they signed a bunch of little contracts, is that Mark Cuban was really looking forward to acquiring. He wanted to get Darren Williams and Dwight Howard. And how was he going to do that? Williams and Howard were both going to be free agents in 2012, and so he was just trying to clear the decks to wait for them. But then Darren Williams got traded during the 2011-12 season and signed a big extension with the Nets, so we couldn't get him. But then Howard was traded to the Lakers because he opted into his contract for his final year, 2012 to 13. And then Howard basically just snubbed the Mavs when he was a free agent, so it didn't pay off doing these little tiny contracts with vets. So if I had to nail down a few reasons why they lost, Number one, they were like all their key players on that team were like right at the end of their primes or like their useful basketball careers, where like a guy like Sean Marion was really kind of like on his way down, declining at that point. Jason Kidd declining at that point. Jason Terry declining at that point. Dirk still in his prime a bit, but like at the end of his prime, but like still like a good clutch player who can give you 30 a night. But really like the end of all those guys being as productive as they were going to be in the NBA. So why didn't they repeat their success? Why was this only a one-year thing? First one, age, I'm going to say, because they all started to get older the next season, and it just didn't work as well because their bodies started to age, obviously. Number two, I'm going to say that they just got the perfect combination of role players for this one season, and they tried to recreate that experiment and catch lightning in a bottle twice, and that's not how it works. You can only catch lightning in a bottle once. So they really were just not able to recreate their success, and honestly, it's it's a huge anomaly that a bunch of role players are able to band together and all simultaneously give their best over the course of a playoff run, which is what happened to the Mavs. You had basically everybody but Dirk was essentially a role player, and they all played great during that playoff run. And really, once all those guys had their expired contracts, they were not able to recreate it with other role players. Vince Carter and Lamar Odom and Delonte West were not able to recreate what Tyson Chandler and Stojakovic and Deshaun Stevenson brought to the team. So reason number two, they caught lightning in a bottle with bringing in a bunch of savvy vets who were still useful at the time. And I think the third reason that they failed and that they didn't have as much repeat success is that the front office was way too focused on the future and not enough on the present. And so the present seasons like 2011 to 12 and 12 to 13 really suffered because the front office was gearing up for Darren Williams and Dwight Howard to become available and wasn't concerned enough with the present. So they signed these like just a ton of guys to really low contracts, and were just not concerned about investing in the current team but only care about the future. So those seasons following the championship really suffered because the team was hedging their bets, not hedging their bets, the team was betting and convinced that they would get these huge stars because they were coming off of a championship run and they had Dirk and all that, but ultimately those guys didn't find Dallas appealing. So three reasons. Number one, aging. Number two, the luck that was involved in finding the perfect combination of role players and randomly signing them, and that not being able to be repeated with just any old group of vets. And number three, finally, the last reason they didn't replicate this success is because they were too focused on the future and not enough on the present, and the seasons following the championship suffered as a result. And when they didn't get the big free agents, all that saving the money was for naught, and they had just wasted 2 seasons for nothing. So there you go, guys. That's the second video in the two-parter about why the Mavericks had one miracle season and didn't repeat it. Hope you guys found this informative and you enjoyed it. And if you have something to say, leave a comment below, question or comment. I'd love to hear from you. And I hope you guys have a good day. Bye.